Hello everyone, welcome to another podcast. Me, Ben Lister here today. Today's episode 13 of the BL and Friends podcast with Stuart Busby. Here we go.
Let's go. Hello everyone, welcome to another podcast. It's Ben Lister. How are you doing today? Right, let's crack on. Welcome to episode 13 of the BL and Friends podcast. Let's go for it, shall we? As you know, each week I have a guest of some of my friends as guests to talk about their hobbies, their jobs, or their careers. So let's crack on with this week's guest. It's broadcaster from all different radio stations. It's the one, the only, Sir Stuart Busby. Hello, Stuart. Welcome along.
Hiya, Ben. I like the sir bit. That's good. I like that. We'll
Excellent.
keep that.
How are you today?
I'm fine, Ben. I'm really well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Just chatting to people again, as usual. Busy bee.
Yeah, you are a busy man.
This year.
How many?
101.
Wow. You've certainly been busy.
Yep. And anything for the people at the moment.
Well, yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? With all of this COVID thing going on, people need some distractions, and it's great for them to have radio and podcasts and stuff to listen to and watch.
And I've actually released all my archive podcast stuff as well.
Have you?
Yeah.
Quite a few then. You've been busy.
About nearly 130, 140 to go.
Wow, that's a lot of work, isn't it?
Yeah, and they're all going on YouTube and my website, the audio and video versions.
Right. You'll excuse me if I keep drinking. It's quite hot in this studio.
Yeah. How is your 5 questions about your broadcast career, if that's okay?
Yeah, fire away.
That's good. Question 1. Are you ready to rumble in the jungle?
Oh, I should imagine so.
Let's go for it. Question 1. Where did you start your broadcast career?
I started my broadcast career online, actually. Not the normal way of doing it. It was only about 5 years ago that I actually started broadcasting, and I was running a website about Tony Blackburn, and I'd uploaded some archive shows of Tony's from the 60s and 70s to that group using Mixcloud, and they were so popular, and I've got so many old archive shows in my collection that I started a new Facebook group. It's called Retro Radio, just for sharing archive shows. And on the first anniversary of that group starting, I decided to do my own show, and I played the number ones, every number one that had been number one on the 16th of April, which is when the Facebook group's birthday was. Every number one from 1960 to 1990 on the 16th of April. And I did that show, and it got a great response from everybody who was listening to it, so it couldn't have been too awful. The following month, I then did another one because people asked me to. And then it kind of went from there. That got me into doing the shows. I went and I did a bit of work on my little local radio station here in Wiltshire. And from there, I put a demo together, sent it off to what was to become UDJ, and was utterly gobsmacked when Tony Prince sort of got in contact and said, like what I hear, do you want to do a show for us? So I couldn't believe it. So that's it. Very potted, quick version of how I got into radio. So via the internet, not actually via radio stations.
Brilliant. Who were your broadcasting inspirations when you were starting out?
Oh, loads of them. I think for me growing up, my first big influence was Steve Wright. Back in the days when Steve Wright was on Radio 1 doing that afternoon show, I loved Steve Wright and used to race home from school because he was on 3 till 5:30 and we didn't finish school until nearly 4 o'clock. So I would race home on my bike and drop everything when I got into the house to run in and catch as much of Steve Wright's show in the afternoon as I possibly could. So Steve was brilliant. This is back in the days of Mr. Angry and Gervais the Hairdresser and all that sort of stuff. It's absolutely fantastic. But I've always collected archive radio. When I was about 11, my mother and father were doing a car boot sale down in Cornwall, where we lived at the time. And I had my pocket money, and we'd gone and helped out with my parents to do this car boot sale. And in the middle of the afternoon, I went and I had a look around the other stalls. And there was a store there being run by an elderly gentleman who had a box of singles, 45 vinyl singles. And I thumbed through these singles and I picked out a couple of old 50s singles, I think Cliff Richard and Adam Faith things. And the chap selling the singles was amazed that this 10, 11-year-old boy was wanting to buy singles from the 50s. So I asked him how much the singles were, and he said, "How much have you got?" And I think I had about £2-3, something like that. And he said I could have the whole box of singles for £3. So he'd obviously taken a shine to the fact that I was a young lad being interested in quite old music. At the end of the day, as everybody was packing up and leaving, this chap appeared with a reel-to-reel tape machine, you know, the old style big reel machines with the open reels on them. It had one reel of tape with it. And he gave me this machine. He came up to my mum and my dad and me and he said, "Look, I haven't managed to sell this. I was really impressed with your young lad being interested in old music. Would he like this?" So this chap gave it to me. And on the reel, on the tape machine, was a recording of the top selling singles of 1970, presented by Alan Freeman, which had been on Pick of the Pops on Radio 1, the archive recording of it. That got me into collecting archive radio. So lots of my influences are DJs that I'm actually too young to remember, but I heard them on those old recordings. So people like Stuart Henry, who was on Radio 1 in the early days. Noel Edmonds, when he was doing the breakfast show on Radio 1, was just brilliant. People like Alan Freeman, who is, for my money, the best guy to have ever done chart countdowns, was Alan Freeman. And then, of course, the wonderful Kenny Everett, just the absolute genius of radio, Kenny Everett, who none of us are worthy to lick Kenny's boots, God bless him. So basically so kind of a wide range of influences from all over the years. And then the later influences from Radio 1 when I was a teenager. So Mike Reed, Mike Smith, Simon Bates, Bruno Brooks, people like that. So loads and loads and loads of influences.
Paul Gambaccini as well.
Yes, see now Paul has that incredible knowledge about all kinds of music. I'm afraid my memory is not quite good enough to compete with Paul these days. When I try to think of interesting facts that I may have once known, my memory is nowhere near as good as it used to be. And I'm a little bit uncertain of what I do and don't know these days, to be honest.
As I say, Kenny Everett's one of the people that I'd have loved to interview, but never got the chance.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, he was just born for radio, that man. And they're still great. If you listen to the shows of his from 40 years ago when he was on Capital, and I think he did some shows for Radio 2 for a while, they're just as good. No, they haven't dated at all. He was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And also Chris Tarrant as well.
Yeah, well, we were talking before we started recording, weren't we, about Chris Tarrant? And having never really lived in London, I didn't get the opportunity to listen to Chris on Capital because I know how popular Chris was. So for me, my kind of main thing when I think about Chris Tarrant is Tiswas on ATV on a Saturday morning when I was growing up with the Phantom Flanflinger. And of course, you know, being sort of 8 or 9 at the time and watching Tiswas, absolutely adored it. Fantastic Tiswas was. So one week we would watch Tiswas and the next week we would watch Swap Shop with Noel Edmonds. We used to alternate between the two.
Yeah. Noel Edmonds is a good guy, and he knows a friend of mine as well called Sean Tilley.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. because Sean Tilley does a series called My Radio 1.
Uh-huh.
where
Noel
he
Edmonds is one of those people that I wish he'd get back to doing radio. I really do. When he stood in for Johnny Walker a few years ago, actually it's quite a while ago now, it must be at least 15 years ago, Noel Edmonds stood in for Johnny Walker on his Radio 2 drive time. And it was so good hearing Noel back on the radio. He's so good at it. I wish he'd go back to doing it.
Yeah, Sean Tilley's trying to get him for an episode of My Radio 1, but he's struggling even though his agent is Noel's brother.
Oh, I see, right.
And even Noel's brother's struggling to get a hold of him because he's that
Isn't
busy.
Noel Edmonds? Noel Edmonds is he in Australia or New Zealand now or somewhere?
I'm not sure, but I think they want to do a My Radio 1 series with him, an episode with him. I'm not sure where he divulges about the Radio 1 archives.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, Noel then went on to Sunday mornings, didn't he? After he'd finished the breakfast show, he did Sunday mornings from Dingley Dell and Perkins Grange, and they were just mad shows. Just every little bit as mad as some of Kenny Everett's stuff.
Yeah, and his co-presenter Mike Smith as well.
That's right. Yes, they did the television together as well, didn't they?
Yeah. Question 3 we move on to now. What is your favourite part about the job?
Oh, blimey. Actually doing it, actually being on air. It's sort of, it can be hard work putting a show together, and certainly setting up the new station that we're launching probably next month in October. That's been hard work, putting that together, far more work than I think any of us really appreciated. But actually being on air and doing the show is the good bit. I'm not too keen on the prep. I'm not too keen on all the other bits of maintenance and things that I have to do with my studio because I'm not very technically minded. So if something goes wrong, it kind of throws me a bit, and I rely on other people with a bit of sense to come and sort it all out for me. So I don't like that. But we've got such great interaction these days with the Facebook groups, where we post the thread on the Facebook group before we start, and then we chat with the listeners on Facebook at the same time. And it makes it like a club, a very friendly club. And there's very rarely any fallings out. They respect us, we respect them. And although Facebook can be a bit of a pain, because it's got many glitches on Facebook, it seems to be a new glitch every day. So Facebook, if I had any hair, Facebook would actually be causing me to pull that hair out sometimes. But actually being on air for those 2 hours, doing the show, having fun, playing good music and chatting away with the listeners and the members in the Facebook group, that's the enjoyable bit. That's the good bit. It's all the other bits around it that kind of take time and aren't quite as enjoyable.
So the prep work, admin.
Yeah, I mean, my show's got quite a lot in it. There's quite a lot of features in my show, which are quite popular. And I do a pop quiz. And actually, I'll give a bit of a shout out to my quiz mistress, Jill Bannon, who's a listener, who actually compiles my pop quiz questions for me. And, that saves me an awful lot of time, God bless her. She's incredible. So she does all of that for me. And then I find the music to go with the questions and all that sort of stuff. So I think prepping shows, I think each show probably takes about 20 minutes to prep, which doesn't sound like much. But because of my other job, because of my day job, I tend to prep the week's shows in one go, which means that you've effectively sat there for well over an hour prepping shows. So that can be a bit tiresome sometimes when you're trying to fit it in amongst work. Radio would be great. It would all be fun. The prep and everything would be fun if I didn't have to do a day job as well. If I didn't have a mortgage to pay and I could just do radio, then it would all be fun. But sometimes the prep is hard work because I'm fitting it in around other things. But other than that, I love it. I absolutely adore doing what I do.
Brilliant. We'll move on to question 4 now. How has COVID affected your life and line of work?
Wow. Well, I think COVID has affected us probably in more ways than we realise, actually, sometimes. I work from home. I work from home for the NHS, and I've done so for about 10 years. So it didn't affect me too much from that point of view. I continued to work from home. The difference was during the lockdowns that my wife, who also works for the NHS, she was working from home. My daughter, of course, was being homeschooled, so we had her to attend to. And my work from home, my wife's work from home, and my daughter's schoolwork all required the internet. But for 2 hours every day, they couldn't use the internet because I needed it for a radio show. So it was a real juggling act. And just that whole feeling of claustrophobia, I think, of feeling like, when was it all going to end? I know that doing the shows on UDJ in the mornings, myself, Bob, Lawrence, Paul Burrell, Mike Reed before him, I think we were huge lifelines to people, certainly in the first lockdown, when we really didn't know what was happening. We didn't know if Armageddon was coming. We didn't know when it would end. It was so uncertain, that first lockdown. And I think for a lot of people, tuning in and listening to the shows in the mornings were a real lifeline, together with chatting with each other on a Facebook group, which meant that they were getting to know new people. And it was a bit like a community centre without the tea and biscuits. Where they'd all go into the Facebook group, get together, have a good laugh and a giggle, and they loved it. So I was quite proud to have played a small part in getting people through COVID, and in a kind of way, it helped us here at the house. It helped us get through it as well, kept us all busy, and I think that was probably the best thing that anybody could do in that situation. In that first lockdown, was to keep busy, not allow yourself to get bored. I wouldn't have minded the time to get bored. I was way too busy.
Question 5, last question on my list before I let you go. What advice would you give to young, aspiring broadcasters who are starting out?
Wow. I suppose these days there are more opportunities than there used to be. Radio is a funny business these days. You don't really, the vast majority of people really don't make any money out of radio anymore. It's hard work trying to do radio as a career, which is a pity, because when I was growing up, there were very few opportunities to get into radio. Whereas now there's lots of opportunities. There's lots of community stations dotted around the country. There's lots of opportunity, but less opportunity to make it into a career, which is a pity. So my advice would be, it doesn't take much these days to put together a little demo, get yourself a decent microphone, and as long as you've got a laptop or a PC, you can put something together. Approach one of your local stations. If you've got a community station, approach that. Failing that, if you haven't got a community station, you can always upload things to Mixcloud and sort of use social media to get yourself known. But the biggest piece of advice I would give is listen to radio, listen to proper radio, listen to all the people who are broadcasting, proper DJs. So kind of avoid Heart, who kind of, it's a bit robotic, Heart Radio. Listen to stations like Sunshine, which is starting soon, where you've got DJs who love radio, as you do, Ben, love radio.
Nation.
Love listening to the old guys and who really know their stuff, people like Tony Blackburn and people like that. Listen to people like that and suck up what they're doing And that's the best training ground. Listen to the guys who really know what they're doing, and then feed off what they do. Don't copy them, but take in bits and pieces of what they do, and just approach the station. And at the end of the day, you've got nothing to lose. If you love radio, it's worth giving it a go.
Yeah, I feel in my head, there's a radio family, like Tony Blackburn's the intelligent radio, the grandfather of radio.
I'm not sure he'd thank you for that.
Bruno Brooks is the uncle of radio.
Right.
And so on and so on.
Yeah. It is very much, I think there's only certain kinds of people that get bitten by the radio bug. And once you're bitten by the radio bug, you've got it for life. Really, with going back to what I was saying about it's very hard to make a living out of doing radio these days. So the absolute golden rule is to enjoy it, is to do something that you enjoy, to have fun doing it, to do it to the best of your ability, but have fun doing it, because all too often it's not much more than a hobby. With Sunshine Radio that we're setting up, we don't have huge aspirations to be the new Radio 2. We're setting it up in a very small scale way. We're hoping to, get a subscription service going to support the station, because there are running costs with any radio station, so it has to support itself. Advertising these days is very difficult to get, but if we can get some advertising as well, fantastic. If anybody wants to sponsor the individual DJ shows, they can contact us at Sunshine, and if they'd like to do that. But we start in a small way, and if it builds from a small thing into a bigger thing, fantastic. But if it just stays as a small thing with a very hardcore, loyal group of listeners, then that's great as well. But the main emphasis is let's have some fun doing this. That's what's really important.
Would you be interested in syndication in the future?
Me personally?
No, your station.
The station. I'm not sure. I think the better thing for radio stations to do is to have specific shows just for their radio station, so that you pull people in with one show and then they want to stay and listen to them all. And I think the only problem sometimes with syndication is that if that show can be heard on loads of different stations, it sort of dilutes its importance. Sometimes it's better to have it on one station, and so that people know that if they want to listen to Bob Lawrence's show, or if they want to listen to Paul Burrell's show, they can go to this station and that's where they are, rather than it being on lots and lots of different stations and you can hear it anyway. That's just my opinion. So what do I know? But personally, I'm not that keen on syndication. It's too much like hard work for me.
I'm just doing it just so I can earn a dime.
Yes, and exactly. And that's another thing. So I wouldn't put down people who want to syndicate, because if that's the way that you can earn a bit of money from doing it, then absolutely, all power to you.
I'm not going to spend it on myself. I'm going to spend it on getting better equipment, doing some shows from home for the listeners. That's all I'm doing it for, the listeners.
To set up a bit of equipment for you and a little bit of a studio there.
Yeah, so I can get so I don't have to go down to the main studio, and it's just in case things with COVID ever go downhill and I'm stuck, you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's uncertain times, isn't it?
Yeah, and if I can get a studio set up here, then I'm set up in case things go downhill again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the way forward as well. It's one of the reasons it's taking us a little bit longer than we anticipated to get Sunshine Radio going, is because in the climate that we're in now, each of the DJs will be coming from their own studio at their own house. UDJ was a little bit different. UDJ had a central studio. So Mike Reed, Tony Prince, Peter Anthony, Sean Tilley initially, Bob Lawrence were broadcasting from that one main studio, which makes it considerably easier to set a radio station up if you've got one main studio. Because we don't have that, we're having to sort out studios for people who don't have their own setup. We're having to work out a way that everybody can log on to one central computer to broadcast their show out. So it's quite complicated. And I have to say, it's not something that I'm in charge of setting up. That's the wonderful Carl Humphreys is dealing with all of that. He understands it. I don't. We wouldn't be on air until 2030 if it was up to me to set it up.
Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you for joining us, Stuart.
It's an absolute pleasure, Ben. It's lovely to talk to you.
Do join me again soon for another podcast very soon. But now please give it up for Mr. Stuart Busby. Thanks very much for watching and listening. This will be available on my YouTube channel and wix.com when I get a chance. Thank you very much. Do join me again soon. Thanks very much for listening and watching. Thank you for joining me. And that's a wrap.
That was my interview with Stuart Busby. Hope you enjoyed it. Episode 13 of the BL and Friends podcast. Hope it filled a gap in your time. Hope you're feeling alright. More uploads coming soon, so don't forget to like, subscribe and all that, and I'll see you in a bit. Bye.